Hello and welcome to Lights, Camera, Inclusion, a video series by Now and Next, the Canada Media Fund's editorial platform. We're back for season 3 and this time we are in Toronto. Over the next few episodes, you will meet some inspiring leaders who are working hard to make sure that our kids and youth have access to inclusive, insightful, and engaging content. Kids today are watching more shows than ever. So how do we make sure that those stories are as rich and impactful as possible? Stand by as my guests are about to answer those questions and more. Let's go. For this first episode, I'm joined by twin sisters, Renata Lopez and Georgina Lopez, both executive producers and co-founders of Lopi Productions. The pair founded the company in 2018 with the objective to create shows that allow every child to see themselves on TV. They also focus on stories being told authentically, with as much diversity behind as in front of the camera. Hi Renata, hi Georgina. Thank you so much for joining me today at this iconic location, the CN Tower. Are you enjoying the view?
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? So you founded Lopi Productions, and as we can see, you're also identical twin sisters. So my first question to you is, did you have any experience working together before founding the company?
We worked together a long time ago, and then we tried to avoid working together again because we found that whenever we worked together, everyone assumed we were the same person. Or people didn't bother to learn our names, or so we were just kind of like the twins or the Lopi, which is why we decided to name our company Lopi Productions, because in tongue in cheek. But yeah, no, one time when Georgina went on mat leave, I was still working, and everyone just assumed that I was her the whole time. So it was kind of funny. We both have been working like parallel in the industry, but intentionally separate until one day we decided to merge forces and
Go all the way.
we were like, one project, we'll try one project, and if we don't kill each other by the end of the year, we'll try it again. And
here we are 6 years later.
6 years later, we haven't killed
Things
each
are
other
going
yet.
well.
Yeah.
Yes, we're surviving.
Yeah, so Lopi features such an amazingly diverse list of shows. You know, you touch on so many forms of diversity, cultural, religious, you touch on disability, Indigenous communities in Northern Ontario. So it begs the question, did you create the shows that you wish you had access to as children?
Yes, definitely. It wasn't something that we intended to do. Like we didn't sit down and we're like, oh, let's do it this way. But then it kind of ended up becoming our sort of common goal that we had was creating.
mandate.
Yeah, so every child deserves to see themselves on TV. We remember seeing ourselves very little. It was like, I think we can name, it was Sesame Street. And remembering the impact that it made. So our goal is to try to give every child that experience and serve like underrepresented groups as well.
I think our whole thing, I always say diversity, but for real. So we wanted to show diversity, it's sure not just skin color and disabilities and stuff, but also just like economical backgrounds. Like you always see kids in mansions, and that certainly wasn't our upbringing. So we tried to show all kinds of, we have on our show My Home My Life, we had different apartments and basement apartments, and families, kind of large families and tiny condos, because that's
The reality.
the reality of what people are like, and we wanted kids to see themselves so that they can see themselves and be proud of where they come from, but also get to see other people that might be like their neighbor, and be better people.
Of course, and you mentioned there the not seeing yourself very much at a younger age. So you grew up in a Mexican family, you moved to Canada from the US at a young age. So you mentioned the impact of not seeing yourselves. Could you tell me a bit more, what was the impact for you?
Yeah, I mean, like we were immigrants to Canada, and in our home, like we speak Spanglish, as we say. So there's Spanish and English, and just our family just does. We didn't realize sort of how different we were culturally from our friends and families and schoolmates, but really I remember seeing on Sesame Street, how they spoke Spanish and English as well. It really made an impact of seeing content or seeing kids like us on TV.
But it was not enough.
Yeah, there's only one show we can
It was so rare. I literally only ever mentioned that because it really was very rare. And, to see big families, we come from a big family. We're 5 siblings altogether.
But we always had aunts and uncles. Like we always had a big family.
Yeah, and you never saw like big families living in
In a
homes
single
like that.
household.
In a single household, or they always lived in these. Georgina and I was like, oh, everyone lives in mansions. Like everyone lives in these massive homes, and so it was important for us to be able to give that to kids to be able to see themselves as well.
Yeah, and in your jobs right now, you get to see the direct impact of your work. So how does that feel? Because you're interacting with children and you're seeing right away like what impact it has on them. So how does it feel to be able to witness that, to be like, at the front row, basically?
I think what we try to show is like everyone has their own story. We had a show Couleur du Nord, which is traveling across northern Ontario in rural communities, francophone communities that you wouldn't ever see on TV. And we brought art to that community, but we also taught kids to, be proud of their identity and where they come from. And I think you could see, it was only a 3-day shoot, but by the end of the 3 days, you really saw the difference that we were making in the community, and also everyone was very excited to see their town on TV. And so I think it makes a difference to be seen.
But with that show, even learning about the different French-speaking communities, and how we only see one kind of French being spoken on TV, and
so much diversity,
no accents, and hearing Northern Ontario French, we didn't realize, being Anglophone ourselves, that we didn't actually realize. We took for granted kind of like the non-diversity of the French. Yeah, we were just like, oh, they speak French, they speak English, but we didn't realize all the different diversity in the French language. And people from, Hearst, Ontario were like, we don't get to hear our accent on, French programming. And we hadn't realized that by just filming and choosing to film in those communities, we were giving a whole population a voice that they hadn't necessarily had before. So
Right.
hearing and
Some pride, I guess.
also like hearing the different regional linguistic differences and how they say things.
Yeah, of course. I wanted to ask about the format of most of your shows, because it's unscripted, often child-led. And do you feel that those two go well together, that, the spontaneous aspect like really goes well with, how the children want to, present their families or interact? Why the focus on unscripted? What do you think it brings to the table?
I think I love unscripted specifically because it gives an opportunity to present diversity and tell stories in an authentic way. We can do our best with writers, and we can try our best in writers' rooms, but there's always kind of like people assuming when they're writing, oh, I think that they would say this, or I think that this is what they're going to say, and whether that's intentional or not. But in the unscripted world, I find it's a lot more, diversity is a lot more authentic, and allowing kids to share their stories in their own way. You kind of get their personal perspectives. So, for example, I always kind of tell the story, but we wanted to tell a story about divorce. And it could have been something, we wanted to present a divorced family, but we could have just wrote like what we thought a kid of divorced family would say, but we allowed them to tell their story. And it was really interesting. They lived 1 week at their mom's house, 1 week at their dad's house, and they kind of told this really happy like loving story, and they're like, I get, you know, double the presents. I get to do, if I like to do something at my mom's house, I get to do it again at my dad's house. And they told it in this like really nice, positive experience of, and we were like, that kind of thing we wouldn't have been able to assume if we had been writing it ourselves. So
Yeah, I also think that children gravitate towards seeing other kids and real kids. Like everyone, I mean, we have children ourselves, but they watch YouTube or TikTok, and they're watching other kids open, you know, toys or show their room. And so we thought, hey, let's build on that and try to make something that will keep our audience watching. And people like to watch other children talking about themselves.
yeah, and in terms of like the disability representation, like a lot of influencers and people online, like you go to see like, you know, deaf influencers or people with disabilities, and it's like everyone's kind of walking online to go see that content because it's not available on TV, and so it's like, where's the disconnect here? So our thing is like, if we're again having real kids with disabilities tell their stories, and it's like just kind of normalizes everything.
Diversity for real.
And you're breaking down like so many stigmas with disability, with northern communities. And I'm also wondering about the behind the scenes work that you do to create those bridges with the various communities. Tell me more about that.
Well, we wanted to also make sure that we were pushing diversity not just on screen, but behind the scenes. So we tried to make a point to hire, you know, underrepresented communities and lots of women, and working our team that way, which then just naturally, I would be constantly like, oh, this is great. We don't really have anybody with disabilities working with us. Let's try to go out of our way. We don't have necessarily other traditional shows have a consultant role that they bring on. So they say, here's our Indigenous show, let's have our Indigenous consultant come in, or here's our disability consultant that comes in. But
All the weight is on the shoulders of that one
exactly,
person.
this one person and their perspective. So what Renata and I, we didn't like that idea. So what we did was let's help out. If we're doing a show about disabilities, we just try to have as many people on our crew that identify as having a disability. So from writers, directors, our producers, you know, a lot of our kids, our hosts, and then you just get naturally their perspective. Yeah. You're not worried about how's it going to see, and you also get a different variety of people because, you know, we're Mexicans, but we don't speak for all Mexicans. You know, it's just you just naturally get diversity.
Yeah, like that's something that we often forget, like the diversity within specific like racialized community or disability community. One person does not represent like the entire community, so that's that way it's like naturally infused into the content. So that was my next question to you, like how does it influence the way things are being made, not only like the end result but the process itself?
I think it feels real. I think there feels like there's an impact on set, like with the fabulous show with Faye and Fluffy. A lot of our team were from the queer, like LGBTQ plus community, and they felt like a lot of them were saying, you know, I wish that there was a show like this for us when we were kids. And I think that we had a lot more, like people were more dedicated and more passionate and like creating a show from their heart because they were attached to it, and it was something that was meaningful. I know that we've all worked on content, you know, we've all worked on things where we're like, okay, it's just a job, but I feel like there was a lot of, you know, constantly the comment was like, I can't believe we get to make something like this. And I think everyone was more aware of the impact that they were making because we were bringing that community together to make that show.
It was also a safe space, you know, so it became kind of a family and a safe space where people, crew, and felt comfortable being themselves, which brought out the best in the cast, because when the kids come on, they're new to television and they're just themselves, they're not actors. So when they can see everyone else being comfortable, they are comfortable, and it makes better content.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we try to sort of create, these environments when we're filming, where we're bringing people together.
Right. And what would you say, looking at the context in general, what would you say are the main challenges that you're facing being in this like children and youth programs, and how do you feel we should address those challenges?
I think it's always time. Children's television doesn't have as big budgets as higher as other shows in Canada. So a lot of companies, they want to like train people and mentor into these positions, but you just don't have the time or the budget. We try to make space for on every show to have trainee directors coming in or new writers. We find there's a lot of great mentorship programs where you give directors the opportunity to shadow or writers an opportunity to shadow, but then you don't hire those writers or directors because when it comes to the bigger shows, you want somebody with 10 scripts on.
Yeah.
So we try to go to those people that have already received some of the training and hire them, give them their first couple scripts, or give directors their first opportunity. And we are sure they move on up and then they like outgrow Low-Pi, but we feel like we're doing our part by making sure that those diversity people get a chance in the industry. So I think that's the biggest hurdle is just time and money, right?
Yeah, I mean the kids space is constantly hoping that there's going to be more funding in the kids space, and trying to the people that make kids content, we know how important it is, but trying to convince all the funders and everybody else to realize how important it is as well.
So tell me, why is it that important?
Well, I think it's, for us, should be important because we are setting the foundation for the next generation, and we're aware of this, and we're constantly reminding ourselves of how important it is. We need to teach the next generation to be kind humans, to respect other ethnicities, to respect, to be proud of your own self. And I think it starts, at a young age, and these are the people that we are impacting. And we remember, again, like I'm going back to the show that we watched as kids. If you see it when you're younger, then you can be like, oh, I am capable of doing that, and I can do that. So
yeah, everyone has memory of how media impacted them when they were younger, and I think so we are doing content that matters, and I feel like in the kids space you're making a difference because you're shaping the next generation. But also I just want to say, like, yes, we're teaching children things, but what ends up happening is they end up teaching you. If you just listen to them,
Right.
they're constantly blowing your mind with their
Do you have
attitudes.
some examples? Like, what have been some things you've learned from?
I think that there was, like, when we were doing the Fabulous Show with Faye and Fluffy, there was some concern, from people that didn't know better about like how kids would react to drag. I know this is a controversial subject these days. I don't know why, but kids reacted perfect. Like, they were very open. They were welcoming. They found that Faye and Fluffy were being themselves, so they wanted to be themselves. And I think that kids, and we would have conversations about topics like racism and
How to be an ally.
But all taught.
being kind.
But we had one episode about like being different, and it was kind of we had a topic that we wanted to talk about. Faye comes out, she's wearing a dress, and as she does, and she said, "Oh, somebody made fun of me today for wearing a dress, and I really love this dress." And this was what happened was so amazing because the audience of children was, between the ages of 4 and 9, and they all started to like immediately comfort Faye. They were saying, "No, you're beautiful."
So much empathy, right?
Yeah, you're beautiful. We love you. Let's try to. And it was just so nice, and it was unscripted, and it was just a real content. And we were saying that's what happens when you have kids together, and you're just in a safe space and environment. You learn so much from them.
Yeah.
I think everyone was blown away just how kind.
Trust kids. They already have. Like, every kid starts off being kind and loving and doesn't really see differences in each other. They're all playing on the playground together. Right. That's the one quality that I miss being able to have, looking at kids, how quickly they make friends. They don't really care about, differences or anything like that. And so, I think that it's so important that we create these shows and we create these environments for these generations, and it will help all of us.
Mm-hmm. And earlier you were talking about, the big streaming platforms or social media, and now, you're creating, very, interesting, diverse programs that are available. How do you feel the consuming habits of children is still, changing? How do we make sure that Canadian children are watching Canadian shows?
I think really realizing the emphasis that content for children is important, and Canada, I think they are still, but they used to be really like with the Mr. Dress Up and the kid shows, and I think we have to realize that you need children's content, and to find money for it and funding, and be able to give a space where you don't lose those shows, because unfortunately that's always the first thing on the cutting block is, oh well, there goes the kids programming, or we can't produce those shows. But that's what actually Canada sells and exports is kids.
I think it's very easy to get into a routine of being like, oh well, we just don't have the time or the money to do that. But I think that you need to be able to, again, realize how important it is and make the time to do it. Like, for example, we did a lot of filming with the deaf community, and when you're filming with the deaf community, you have to have an interpreter. There's a lot of extra steps that need to happen, and some
longer days.
Yeah, they're longer days.
It needs to be budgeted.
Yeah, and these are things that you don't necessarily take into consideration, and like other places might be like, well, we just don't have the time, so we're not going to have deaf representation. But we made a show with a deaf family in 2019, and to this day we still get emails and calls about how important that one episode was, and they were like, we don't see families like this, and we still we're like, how can we get more shows like this? So I think you do need to spend the time and the money, and you need to stop being like, no more excuses. Like,
I also think that with diversity and inclusion, it's a word, that people say, oh, we need some diverse content. Let's greenlight a couple shows. But that, I think that you need to remember that those shows are so important to the audience. And so it's not just a one-off, okay, we did our check mark.
Ticking a box, yeah.
Child in wheelchair check mark.
Mexican show to check.
Because that's the audience that's watching and gravitates. And like with the deaf example, it was very well watched and well received, and they're just dying for more content. So I hope that broadcasters and funders just recognize that it can be commercial too, because that's the audience that is dying for this content, really wants to watch it. And so think of it as, it's not just, you can have a diversity show that is also commercial and also does well.
Yeah, it's not like, mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And just before wrapping up, I have to ask you, what's on the horizon for Lopi? What's in the pipeline?
Our goal at this point, so we've been very lucky with the last 6 years to create 6 original series for pretty much all the broadcasters here in Canada. Our goal is to continue to build the brand. So we want to make season 2 and season 3, and really want to, continue to create these brands and expand on these brands. But also, our goal is also to go outside of Canada and the global outreach as well. So we have been lining up like international conferences and international distribution, and trying to get more eyes on our shows.
Also, we went to that Latin forum, and I think we realized, we should work and make shows more about our culture. And so we have some shows in development that'll be more, about Mexican community and Latinos. And we just feel like that, we want to support, our own people.
And building those bridges there as well. Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for coming in today, both of you. It was really lovely chatting, and I truly wish you and Lopai the best moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.